Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I'm real excited to have you. Thanks, whether you're watching this on video, on YouTube, or listening to it on my podcast. It really means a lot that you've taken the time to check out my channel and the things I have to share related to education. So today I want to talk a little bit about instructional strategies, and one specifically, which would be teacher questioning. I think I'm going to do a series of these chats on different instructional strategies because although we in education talk a lot about technology and innovation, I think there are some root strategies that are key and really essential for any teacher to master to be an effective educator. So today I'm going to talk about teacher questioning, which could be a very effective and engaging instructional strategy. However, it can also be a strategy that has really little impact on education if not used appropriately. As we know, since the days of Socrates, teachers have been using questioning to encourage student thinking, to check for understanding. And high quality teacher questioning is much more than just tossing out questions and calling on random students to answer. Developing questioning skills really can take a lot of time and professional development. And there are some simple rules teachers can follow that hopefully you can walk away with that can add some immediate improvements for you as a teacher and as an educator when using questioning in your classroom. So today I'm going to share 5 rules for teacher questioning for you to consider. The first one is to have a purpose for your question. When asking a question, the question itself should have a purpose. A teacher should know if the question is intended to either promote conversation, dialogue, or discussion, or maybe it's simply to solicit a response to check for understanding. Good questions, however, engage more than one student at a time. They provide an opportunity for students to discuss, to turn and talk, to debate, to have a conversation, and they should lead to students generating their own questions, and which allow for multiple types of responses. However, when a teacher asks a question that has one specific answer and calls on one student to answer it, the question can have very little educational value or impact on the rest of the class. So consider questions in terms of what type of impact can this question have on the entire class? How can we engage the entire class through the use of this specific question? And it causes us to take some time and plan out some of those questions. The second simple rule is ask one question at a time. Many times teachers will ask a question, then rephrase it, then say another question in a different way before students even have a chance to respond. I think most teachers would be really surprised if they had a count of how many questions they asked students in one class period. I did a sort of informal survey or observation of this in our building a couple years ago. And in a 42-minute class period, I would say our teachers were asking between 1 and 200 questions per class. And that may sound like a high number, but I can guarantee you, if you went around and observed another teacher without telling them what you were doing, you'd be shocked at the number of questions, sort of this rapid fire pace of questions that teachers are asking. Many of them are low level, many of them are directed toward one student, and they come one after another after another. When it comes to high quality questioning as a strategy, I would argue less is more. We need to be more thoughtful about the type of questions we're asking and not ask so many of them. The third rule sort of relates to the second rule of one at a time is pick one question. Teachers should know the question they're going to ask. It should be pretty well pre-planned and ask it with clarity. If it needs to be repeated, you should really try to repeat the question verbatim. Many times teachers will ask a question, immediately rephrase it, sometimes add more detail, ask it in a different way, add more detail, then maybe even rephrase it again. By the time the teacher states the final revised question at the end, it may be drastically different than the original one. That can leave students who might have raised their hand right away really confused as to what the original question was and if their answer aligns to that. Pre-planning at least some of our questions is the only way to make sure that we're asking high quality questions, that they're aligned to our objectives and learning outcomes, and they're appropriate for the lesson, and we can repeat them verbatim. So of course teachers should and can use spontaneous questions as appropriate. Students certainly, we'd love for them to be doing the same. However, I would say there should be a handful of key questions that we've generated that have a purpose, that are pre-planned, and that are aligned to our objectives. The fourth rule is to wait, using wait time. Now, many of you may be familiar with this strategy, utilizing wait time. Some people, teachers feel it's really important to get through the lesson. Many people are really uncomfortable in silence. However, it's important for teachers to provide appropriate wait time when asking a question. Remember, if you're asking high quality questions that require real thinking and discussion, answers are going to take time. Students are going to need time to process. Personally, I stopped my students years ago from using their hands. I called on students randomly. I made sure I always responded to them in a way that made them feel safe, so I wasn't putting them on the spot, and I was never using it as a gotcha moment. And although I don't know that this is a scientifically proven method and in terms of the appropriate amount of wait time, but I would say for a general question, 5 to 10 seconds at least. I've heard teachers say, for example, a student really doesn't participate in their class, and even some of their grades have suffered for lack of participation. But then I'll watch a teacher repeatedly call on the first student who raises their hand, and they don't even give some of the other students an opportunity to process and participate. So I would say give students time to process, think, share and discuss amongst themselves, and then share out. That's another way to really involve more students as well, instead of just calling on students right away. And finally, the fifth rule I want to share today is to use scaffolding. When we're planning questions, it's really important for teachers to review the content around the question. Teachers should really be aware of the prerequisite knowledge that's needed to answer that question, as well as some knowledge that might extend the learning if a student really masters, knows the answer right away. What's another question I could ask to extend the learning at a higher level? If a teacher asks a question and a student doesn't know the answer, you could scale down to a more simple prerequisite knowledge question and then build that student back up. The strategy is more supportive of student learning rather than jumping to another student to answer the question for them. That doesn't do anything to help the thought process of the student that didn't know the answer to the first original question. So again, using scaffolding is a really important strategy when building students up and really engaging them in high quality questioning. Being able to adjust your question is really a complex task, but we should have sort of the scale of questions that we could ask around those handful of high quality questions that can really range from simple to complex, and a teacher can access to help a student either get up to the original question we had hoped they would be able to answer, or even extend their learning further. So those are 5 simple rules of teacher questioning. Some of those you can implement tomorrow in your classroom with not a whole lot of thought or planning. And I would love to hear your feedback on these items, on these types of ideas surrounding teacher questioning. And feel free to comment or share your thoughts on this as well. Once again, I really thank you for joining me. I invite you to check out my website at principalmkelly.com. In addition, you can follow me on my YouTube channel, or also subscribe to my podcast on iTunes. Thanks again for joining me, and have an awesome day.
Yeah.